right, bringing to the table items from something you didn't want to miss to the table. We'll begin with looking at the Armed Forces Remembrance Day commemoration, where the president has restated commitment to fighting insecurity. You know, of course, I'm not alone here. Dr. Idahosa Osamhanze is here, and David Chedu is also in the house. Good
Blessing,
morning
good
again,
morning.
gentlemen.
Good morning once again.
It's great to be in your midst. I know you feel glad too that you're here with me.
As always.
All right, let us start with Dr. Idahosa. Armed Forces Remembrance Day. This is a yearly commemoration, and we do know the challenges that the Nigerian Armed Forces currently dealing with, given the insurgency in Nigeria. So they have to be under field most of the time, and it's not really been an easy one, even for Nigeria funding the military. So on this day where the president gets to reassure the soldiers fighting that, hey, the country is solidly behind you and we're committed to providing all that you would need to fight insecurity, how does this make you feel? And what do you think about the Nigerian military so far?
Well, I was going to ask you a question, Blessing.
Okay, please do.
I've grown up to see that every time you talk about Armed Forces Remembrance Day, there's one thing that is very unique about it.
What's that?
I see some soldiers all along the street begging money. What does this mean for the remembrance of people that are fallen?
It's not a good one. It's not a good one, which is why the reassuring of the president is very important, but it should go beyond reassuring them on this day. It should not even be only on Armed Forces Remembrance Day, because when those who are growing up, I'm talking about young ones, grew up, maybe they have parents who have served in the military and they retire. They see how they struggle to get their benefits. They see how, like you mentioned, the ones who are on the streets begging, you know, sometimes they appeal, sometimes they use some other means to get money from citizens, because welfare, their welfare is not really looked after as it should be. It's really saddening. It's saddening, and you feel like these are people who have risked their lives. Some have even given their lives. They're falling on the battlefield in the course of fighting to protect the territorial integrity of the country, or to ward off those who would want to invade the country. So it's not a good thing. And really, on this day, even if we do not have any other time to look at it, we should look at the welfare. The country has to do something about the welfare of soldiers while they are serving and after they are serving. Because even after serving, some of them are traumatized, some of them become handicapped because they've had injuries, different issues. Their welfare really needs to be attended to.
I totally agree with that submission. Mr. President coming out to encourage our troops, gallant troops, I must say. Very, very nice, very, very in order. But it should go beyond just mere assurances. It should reflect in, just as you said, what is being done to and for them during active service, and especially after active service. It'll be in order, or in most cases, it'll be expected, so to speak, for you to reward someone who is actively working for you, right? But afterwards, in most cases, it's bye-bye, see you next time, or if we ever see each other, which is not supposed to be the case. Still harping on this welfare issue, the late Chief of Army Staff, Mr. Lagbaja, sometime last year, I think in the middle of last year, made an announcement with regards to a post-service home ownership scheme and a couple of other initiatives which were aimed at giving succor, so to speak, to the troops after active years in service. Listen, I'm going to say this without fear of favor and unequivocally. The Nigerian military is one that is well respected on the continent. In fact, as we speak, I think we're about third or fourth. I think fourth, yes. Only fourth to South Africa, Egypt, and Algeria, if memory serves me right. And we do absolutely brilliant work. These guys are trained to do something that you and I are not trained to do, that other, security, members of the security architecture aren't trained to do. Especially the exploits essentially flourished in my opinion anyway, in the second and third republic of the country, even dating down to this point. So, like Doctor said earlier, you still see some of them from that era, looking for handouts, and it's not supposed to be so. So we need to focus on that.
Let's get the thoughts of Dr. Idahosa. There's a reason you asked that question, so I really want to get that.
I feel really that the best way to remember a man is to continue a legacy for which they live. So when we speak about Armed Forces Remembrance Day, and especially talking about those heroes that were fallen, whether those who died at the First or Second World War, participating in the Civil War, trying to control crime. Now, one thing is very, very critical to all these enterprises, the fact that these guys died trying to maintain peace, bring order to society. And I think the best way to remember is not just going to lay wreaths on the graves of those who are fallen, is for us to, for example, emphasize the importance of unity. Why nations or why individuals, communities, ethnic nationalities should themselves embrace each other, so that the reason why these men died on duty don't recall.
That's a line from the old anthem, "The labors of our heroes past have not been vain."
Yeah, so it's quite fundamental that while we're celebrating these heroes who died in the cause of serving the nation, the things they died for, we must work hard. Because when you look at our nation today, the level of sensationalization of national issues, we are more divided today than we were during the Civil War. So the issues that took us to Civil War, they are so still very present with us today. And we are not making any attempt to resolve those issues. Now, look at it on the other side. Criminality in the environment was responsible. A lot of people who cannot withstand hunger have to always look for a means to survive. So, which means, how do we make the country livable? That children who are growing up can have some sense of nationalism, and of course have also some sense of a future that looks bright and not bleak. So these are the issues we need to tackle. Today, nobody talks so much about hardware in terms of military warfare. People are talking about the software. Now we must begin to invest in that software, how we make people feel belonged. Remember what they call the Maslow hierarchy of needs. So at the very base, you have the physiological needs. People want to eat, people want clothing, people want housing. And now some of these issues are far-fetched in our environment. How can government demonstrate that we really carry your interest in our hearts so that our men are not dying like fowl trying to combat insecurity? And I feel really the money that we are putting so much in buying hardwares, if we invest it in the software part of security, we will gain more results than we are doing buying ammunitions, fighter jets, which of course had not really brought peace to bear in the environment.
You've said something very fundamental, keeping the peace. Because where there is peace, you would not need to invest so much money in buying weapons and all. Because after all, it's not like Nigeria is fighting the war. There's a war between Nigeria and any other country. It's just within Nigeria, the insurgency within Nigeria. So if we can tackle the grassroots issues, the root issues, why there's youth restiveness, there is terrorism in some parts of the country, then of course would have reduced the energy and the investment, not investment now, the energy and the money that goes into procuring ammunition and even taking care of the soldiers on the battlefield. But I think also that the families of the soldiers should be taken care of. Because when a man is taking his life, he should have that confidence that if anything happens to him, his family would not suffer. What happens to his wife? What happens to the children? We've seen cases where the widows and the children of soldiers that have died are left to themselves. Nobody cares for them. Some of them have to even leave the barracks where
But it didn't include the widowers.
Yes, the widowers as well. But we have more of them who are male. Okay. So that's why I said widows. So it's something that their interest has to be taken care of. Not just while the person who's the soldier, whether male or female, is serving, but afterwards. That is very critical. It will also boost their morale. If they know very well that there is a package that takes care of their family, it helps them. And that's why some of them are aggressive when they come into the city and they're relating with citizens. Some of them are angry. It's like we're out there risking our lives and you people are here. But it's not all the fault of the citizens as well. It is governments too who has to ensure that they are well taken care of.
You see, there are very strategic way people are dealing with national issues. And I think these are things that, of course, we can also borrow from as a country. I cannot overemphasize the fact that as a country, we have not taken advantage of the opportunities that the insurance industry portends to everybody, whether serving military officer or even people who are in a civil service. Now, we're not taking advantage of that. We can have insurance for those who are serving. We can have investment for them. Take, for example, Etisalat. Etisalat was designed purposely by the UAE government for teachers. That company was built for teachers. What did the government of the UAE do? They decided to set up a company and float it in the market for the teachers. Every teacher in the UAE is expected to buy 40,000 dirham worth of the stock of Etisalat. And the government understood that they didn't have this money. So they paid upfront for them. So what you see is these teachers, at the end of the year, receive dividend from Etisalat. It was invested on their behalf because the government realizes that the take home for these people was near to nothing. Now, we also have the children of our military. People we know that are in the front line for us. There are few things that government can do. Free education for their children, from primary to the university. Make them good citizens in society. That even if their parents are dead, those grants don't stop until they finish schools. Now, once you invest in the life of these people, it takes a lot of burden off the parent. And the little meager salary that you are paying them is enough for them to live everyday life. And I think these are a few initiatives that we can actually put in place that will not require so much money, given the size of our military.
One other issue which is particularly germane at this point in time with regards to the subject matter is the allocation, the budgetary allocation, as it were, for this particular cause. Talking about security and defense. So for last year, we saw a 1.67 or thereabout trillion naira in the 2024 budget, which was about 5.7% of the budget. There were, hues and cries on different corners, very, pockets of voices here and there saying that, it could have been more, or it should have been more, given what we have to deal with, swathes of crime and criminality, from terrorism to banditry, cult-related activities to oil pipeline vandalizations, and a myriad of them here and there. And again, of course, what we're talking about, which is the welfare of these wonderful, gallant officers, put together. They were saying that it wasn't enough, but then there's 2025 budget, which is I think about 4.1 trillion right now. It's still it's still on the floor of the National Assembly. So again, are we looking at just channeling all of these, mostly to what Doctor said earlier, talking about hardware? Or are we channeling a good chunk of these monies toward taking care of these people the way that they should be taken care of? Because if they're not right, mentally, psychologically, and otherwise, they cannot particularly adequately carry out their security functions or their assigned functions, as it were, which is, which always has a knock-on effect, because what you see is a drop in morale. What you see is, disenchantment. What you see is disillusionment in the camp of these, wonderful soldiers of ours. So it's a really critical issue that needs to be addressed. So whether or not this year's budget is enough, well, is left to be seen.
All right, we'll move on to the next story.
We will salute the gallantry of our military officers who risk their life daily to ensure that we are safe. And for those that are fallen, we say continue to rest in peace.
Well done to all the Nigerian soldiers. All right, moving on. The Central Bank of Nigeria has sanctioned 9 banks for cash unavailability via ATMs during the UTAD. This is something that concerns me, concerns David, concerns Dr. Idahosa, concerns you watching. Because during the UTAD, it seemed like it's become a normal now. You just expect it. That once we get into December, max, it takes like the first and second week. So you are not sure of going to any ATM and getting cash. But you will get money from the point of sale operators, the POS operators, who are supposed to be like serving the gap or bridging the gap where you do not have banks. But now, you would even find some of them positioned right in front of ATMs, right in front of banks, because they know that you going to the ATM, you won't find cash, but they always have cash. Now, the central bank has placed a sanction on 9 of them. I can't tell you how pleased I am with the CBN at this, but I think this is coming rather late.
Well,
it's better late than never.
And I think that is exactly what it is.
Because it should have been done before now. How do because when you get to the bank and the bank is not giving you as much cash as you want, for instance, 20,000 naira, and the bank says to you, we can only give you 10,000 naira cash. But you go to the POS operator and you can get exactly the cash that you want. Where did they get the cash from? What is going on? What sort of arrangement is ongoing between the POS operators and the banks that we, the customers, do not know? That you can always find cash with ATM operators, POS operators rather, but you barely find cash at ATMs. This, I think, will make the banks sit up and do what is right.
You know, the POS industry took off with the redesign of the Nigerian Naira. Prior to that, what you have is that a lot of banks were looking for those outlets where they could serve people really well. But you go to the ATM, you can withdraw as much money as you want. And of course, with that exercise that was carried out by the immediate past CBN governor, we saw that money trade became a very huge industry. And people are now taking money and actually trading on mints and the rest of it. So CBN releases mints to the bank, POS buy it off them, and then of course they resell to the citizens. And there's a whole lot of trade that is going on. And one of the things that worries me is the fact that we have ATM machines installed with depositors' money, and they are not dispensing. And then, of course, cash is coming into the banks straight from CBN. And I think that CBN need to really wear this real serious hammer and see how this money are dispensed. And if there are no consequences, like they say, where there is no law, there is no sin. So I think we need more real severe sanctions for this thing to happen, so that people take the ATM as a primary source and the POS just become something like this thing. So, but because the POS idea was actually to help cashless economy for people who are selling. So rather than go to shops with cash, so you can swipe your card and then there's no need for movement of cash. But what we see today is, like you have said, in short, I used to be afraid of a certain lady who was sitting in front of the ATM in our gate, and whenever she's there, you cannot find money in that ATM. And I felt that, look, something really was very
It's
bad
like,
and
it's
wrong.
like this is already, there are days of the week, I don't know if you've observed, Sundays especially, you barely find ATMs that dispense cash. Sundays and some other days. And you wonder, like, where did they come to this agreement that on certain days of the week,
There will be money.
there will be no cash. You can't get cash from the ATMs.
Listen, color me surprised, ladies and gentlemen, because I never thought some 10, 12, 13 years later, after the advent of the cashless economy back in 2011, 2012, if I'm not mistaken, that ATMs will now, that POSs will now become ATMs, or POSs will be replacing, so to speak, I put that in quotes, ATMs, which is problematic. As Dr. said, and rightly so, we run a system of a lack of consequences. That's just what I see at play. How do you explain racketeering in the banking sector without talking about this? How do you explain racketeering in Nigeria's financial architecture without talking about this? It is a thorn in our flesh, because I know that every one of us sitting in this room right now, and for you watching, has at some point or the other gone through this. Listen, I don't think anybody wants to relive the trauma or the horrors of, was it 2 years ago now, when the
cash
redesign debacle happened. That was problematic. And I particularly have a grounds or a bone to pick with some of the top tier, the tier 1 banks, the FUGAs as they're popularly called, First Bank, UBA, Guarantee Trust Bank, Axis Bank, and what's the last one? Zenith Bank, right? That's the tier 1 banks. Now, was it yesterday or the day before, the NCC has directed telcos to cut off their USSD services. These banks, tier 1 banks, are what's it called? They're corporates. 18 banks were sanctioned because they've been owing 200 million, is it billion now? I forget, since 2019.
Yes,
so it's problematic.
They charge customers for USSD, SMS, and all of that.
And they don't pay the telcos. So if these banks, had been erring, and they still are involved. In fact, as far as this particular story is concerned right now, the same Fugas banks are still there. We're talking about First Bank. They're listed here. We're talking about UBA. They're listed here. Zenith is listed. So if these banks who make up an integral part of Nigeria's economy or Nigeria's financial economy can be erring in this manner, then I'm thinking the 150 million naira fine is just a tap on the wrist. Give them something heavy, like we say in local parlance. We go shake them. If we shake you once, shake you twice.
Talking about that list, I think that more banks should have been in that list, because there's hardly any bank you go to that you don't experience this. You don't find cash in. It's almost like the ATMs are just there for decoration. They don't work. You go there, they're not, even during working hours, bank hours. How come they do not have cash? And people going to the bank to deposit cash. So why are we charged on both ends? So the bank deduct charges, and the ATM you also need to pay. And some of them charge you exorbitant rates, especially during the UTAD, certain seasons where they know, there is more buying and selling. So you want to withdraw maybe 10,000 naira. They go from the usual 200 naira charge on that to as high as 300 naira.
Yeah, but again, there's a second dimension to it.
So it's increasing the cost of transaction.
Some banks also have complained that, yes, you load your ATM and you are not there in the night, and the POS operator comes and they use their card to withdraw the money and then sell the following day. And then, of course, there's also the trend of the POS people also buying money. They go to motor parks where people spend cash and go to fuel stations to actually take money. So what that also means is that once the people are selling cash, those cash don't return to the bank. They go through the POS back again into the hands of the citizen. So it becomes very difficult for the visibility of the currency in circulation to CBN. Now, the only one the CBN is able to monitor is the mint, the freshly printed money, because those ones have serial numbers that, of course, you can track. But for old notes, they are absolutely very difficult for CBN to track. because most time those monies don't come back to the bank, and the POS operators harvest them at source.
I'll respond to that by saying when the purpose of a thing is not known, then abuse is inevitable. So if the purpose of the POS is not known, people will abuse it. You stated the purpose of it. It is to help the cashless policy.
Yeah.
So how do banks give out POS to people? On what ground do you allocate POS machines to people? Do you have a business that people come in and you don't want them always paying cash that helps you? Or you want to trade currency? So if it's for currency, then they can begin to withdraw certain POS from people. Because if they do not have the POS machines, they do not have the POS machines,
the POS is an industry. You see, Nigerians are very, very, very cerebral people, innovative and creative. Everybody must think about how to get resource from the environment. Now, it's observed that, of course, the intention of government is that they don't want too much of cash in the hands of people. So that's already creating an opportunity for the POS operator. Because we know most Nigerians, because of the trust deficit in the environment, you have situations where you want to go to somebody, you're buying something, and of course you're doing a transfer, and they are telling you in the last 2 days, the money has not dropped.
The money.
Yes, and so if money don't drop, they are suspicious. And therefore, these guys will need to take cash instead of transfer. So these are the challenges within the economy. Because of course, we also don't take away the role of the internet in all of this, where of course access is a huge challenge. This environment where we are, if you want to make call, you have to run to some certain place so that you can find network. So all these things is actually what is fueling cash carrying in the environment. And so we are able to actually invest in this technology, and then of course transaction can become seamless. We will not be anywhere, and that's where we are still talking about in Nigeria, where, for example, we have not sufficiently been able to lay the fiber optics to cover up to 50% of the nation. We are still struggling with Abuja and Lagos, whereas small countries like Rwanda, since about 15 years ago, had done cabling around the entire of the nation, 90% complete. So anywhere, even in forests in Rwanda, 4G is working. But here we have that access problem, and so they need to invest in infrastructure so that transaction becomes seamless and people are not needing cash. And then of course we can trust the system that when I send money, if it's an instant transfer, it's delivering instantly. So this is a problem. So the POS operator knows that people will value cash, and therefore they are afraid that transaction may not happen in real time. Then that's created an industry where they are also buying cash and selling cash to the public.
I think the CBN needs to do more with regards to sanctioning. Yes, they need to do more with regards to sanctioning. It's embarrassing to me personally, and I reckon to most Nigerians who know this stuff, that we are dealing with these sort of quote-unquote broad daylight robbery, as you were. So the CBN, now more than before, or now more than ever, needs to really tighten the noose around these financial institutions and make sure that they don't keep robbing Nigerians, willy-nilly.
Yeah, but I think what I've been doing recently was the fact that, of course, every POS had now been asked to register with the banks, register their businesses, so that we actually know where these POS are and what kind of services that they are doing. Because apart from even the fact that they are trading money also, even short-changing customer is also very rampant, because I've heard cases where people were actually supposedly to be paying or taking 5,000 you are withdrawing from your account, you're giving somebody 5,000 naira, but instead you actually have taken 50,000 from the person's account. Because not many people have the eye to see what is on the POS. So you just add an extra zero, and then of course you are defrauding somebody of money. But I think there's a need to sanitize that environment and that space. Now that we know that it's a business for some people, then government must also extend oversight to what they are doing and ensure that books are kept so that the society is not shortchanged for it.
So CBN, the ball is now in your court for you to go harder on banks who have compromised and running some form of organization with the arrangement with the POS operators to make it hard for us to have access to cash, but the POS operators always have cash. That excuse that the POS operators come at 9 to withdraw, I don't find that tenable at all. So if you notice that you reduce the amount of cash that you load your ATMs with at night, the money is needed during the day. So why don't we still have cash during the day? So there is more that can be done. The FCPC and NCC have partnered for better consumer protection. So that is the Federal Consumer Protection Commission and the Nigerian Communications Commission partner for better consumer protection. Well, the telcos recently have been talking about increasing rates because it's become, according to them, it's become necessary that they do so, reflecting the current realities within the industry, cost of operation, and all of that. So the NCC too, coming in partnership with the FCCPC, it's a good arrangement, but sometimes some of these things are just talk. It's a hard it's a hard battle you need to fight in order for you to be able to get justice if, as a consumer, you've been shortchanged. So it's more like a laborious process.
I think the real bigger challenge in our public space is the fact that we want to eat our cake and still have it in our hands.
How do you mean?
Yeah. This is a problem. Take, for example, what people are arguing. The last time they increased tariff was about how many years ago? Now, when you see what has happened in the last 18 months of this administration alone, in terms of cost of operation, don't forget that this telco, they all have generation sets in all their mass, and they are fueling it with petrol and with diesel, that its prices is at rooftop. So what they're saying is that if we say we cannot increase our price, and therefore we have to give customers this same price that we're charging about 10 years ago or 5 years ago, is no longer realistic given the reality in the market today. And I think that's a challenge. Why we're not really running a state-controlled economy, and it's supposed to be determined by market forces, and then government is still intervening to determine at what point prices are increased. And this is a big problem. Because if you have been able to regulate, for example, inflation, that they are not growing on month by month, and then, of course, you have been able to regulate the exchange rates, that they are not fluctuating and they are stable over time, then, of course, you now have the moral ground to actually say to telcos, you see, nothing fundamentally has changed. And if nothing is changing, then you don't need to increase. Now, there's a whole lot of things that the increase in pump price of petrol had cost. So, which means, of course, these telcos are forced to increase their overhead in terms of salaries and wages and allowances that are paid to staff. All these things are mounting, and that is why you see that they are declaring losses. So how do you expect your economy to grow when your companies are not making losses? And this is why, of course, even the Consumer Protection Council must understand there's also a competition in their name. It's a federal competition, and consumer protection is a, so there's a competition that it is that the business needs to survive first, then be able to actually pay tax to government. And that frame ecosystem where that profitization can happen must be created by the state. So you cannot, on the one hand, ask people not to increase price, but then, at the other hand, you are failing on your duty to stabilize the economy so that people can operate at a certain level. All my days or years I've been in the UAE, the exchange rate of dollar to dirham has remained between 3.64 to 3.66. It has not changed significantly. So in that environment, you can say, oh, well, you can't increase price. Because if there's a need to increase price, we have to factor the inputs in. But here, this other side is not helping, but we're trying to weigh on private businesses where you don't even have interest and tell them that they cannot increase price. I think that's a big problem from NCC.
Just in a few words, just a few seconds, I'm all up for opening up, the space, the business space, so that everybody can, there's a Chinese saying, may 1,000 flowers bloom, right? If the space is open enough, if we actually practice that free market economy, then it means, whatever you and I buy, or whatever purchase you and I make will be largely dependent on market forces. So if you have, the regulatory bodies creating an environment where there is fair competition, as the FCCPC is trying to do, then it's to the advantage, so to speak, of the average Nigerian, because what they just simply want to do is get something that they can afford, essentially. So if Mr. 1, Mr. A, Mr. B, Mr. C, XYZ have businesses and they just want to keep the market closed, as it were, it becomes problematic for the consumer, because at the end of the day, when they all decide to hike prices or have some really irregular, unfair pricing scheme, the consumer is left with no option. But if it's open and anybody can come in and play and anybody can come in and operate, by the time Mr. A, B, and C starts to, let me use the word, misbehave, the consumer has options. They can go to, so even if the services aren't great, it'll behoove on the consumer to either stick with the one that they can buy for a cheaper price that is not particularly giving them what they want, or go back to the ones that they used to patronize that had prices hiked. So it's essentially, in my opinion, should be to the advantage of the Nigerian consumer, because, they've been shortchanged for a little too long.
Yeah, talking about being shortchanged, I'm up for increasing rates to reflect current realities, but I'm also big on making the services rendered commensurate to the price that consumers pay for it. Even the big players who have been in the industry for years, who were very, very stable and established, we have cases of too many downtimes. You try this network, there's downtime, the service, the quality of service is poor. So that's one aspect that the FCCPC and NCC should also look at. It's not enough for the telcos to be crying for increase in rates, but they should also ensure that the service they provide is commensurate with the rates that consumers are made to pay. All right, there's a wrap on the news analysis. We'll take a break. After that, it's time for Policy Discuss. It's still the front burners. Stay.